Bring a Trailer podcast. Well, Bruce, I'm excited to be here with you today on the BAT podcast. For everybody listening, I want to tell everybody about a super special episode we have today, which is talking with Bruce Meyer from Los Angeles, California. He kind of needs no introduction in the car world, being a collector and an enthusiast and a big backer of the Petersen Museum, and just kind of the guy who has done all the car things we all want to do. That's kind of how I describe you, Bruce. And somehow along the way, you also tripped across Bring a Trailer, which was meaningful for me, and then we got to meet after that. So just wanted to say thanks for chatting with me. Thanks for having me here to your garage today.
It's a pleasure, long overdue. And I've been following Bring a Trailer probably since its inception. I tripped across it. And as I recall, you just found cool cars in places that people didn't look, and it intrigued me. So I always looked at them and enjoyed them, and I've always enjoyed the fact that you're a true enthusiast. You didn't monetize this. I'm just speaking out of turn, but I don't think you ever did that with the idea of taking it to where it is today. Maybe you did, but for me, it was just an enthusiast sharing what we all love, and that's the hunt and finding unusual things. And so I want to say thanks.
No, for sure. My pleasure. We're all happy with where BAT is today, and that one of the neatest things about BAT for me is kind of discovering who's lurking around on BAT, and who's there, and some people and some people are more anonymous and sort of behind the scenes. You've been sort of behind the scenes, but have always been very gracious to me whenever I showed up and said, "Hey, Bruce, remember me? It's Randy from Bring a Trailer." I was this kind of young nobody trying to kind of pull on people's shirt sleeve a little bit at a car show or whatever, and you were super gracious and said, "Oh, Bring a Trailer, I know that deal, like what are you doing, Randy? Good to see you." So anyway, that's been super encouraging for some other folks coming up in the car business like I have done, and sort of following in your footsteps. But yeah, people may hear a little bit of a echo today in our audio just because we're in a big, beautiful room full of a few cars of yours in Southern California today, which is very inspiring. I'm looking out on a number of sort of dream cars, and you've obviously curated a collection of fun cars over the years. But you talk about the hunt. Maybe why you like BAT was because of the hunt of cars. You were doing that long before I was ever doing that on the internet, right? You were doing that who knows where, but could you tell us a little bit maybe about your start in cars and where that inspiration came from?
Well, it did not come from the family. We didn't have the money to waste time on cars, and my parents had zero interest in cars. And, if I even mentioned car, they thought, get a job. I mean, just do something worthwhile. So I say the love of cars is in your DNA. I have 3 children, 3 amazing children. We do, my wife and I, 54 years of marriage. And it took real strong on one, our middle son. The other 2, have an interest because they like to see me doing what I enjoy doing. But I just think it's in the DNA. You're either a car guy or not. Gals and guys and whatever pleases you. But I think it is in the DNA. And friends of mine bring their kids by. Friends of mine that have no interest in cars bring their kids by, and they've just loved cars from birth, and that was me.
And didn't you tell me a story once about how it started to be sort of a side hustle and making money for you? Were you selling and buying motorcycles or something? Or how did that start when you were in college?
Did we talk about that?
We have talked about that. You've shared some secrets with me. Maybe I shouldn't bust your bubble here on the secrets, but
No.
You were up in Berkeley and doing something with motorcycles, weren't you?
Yeah. When you went through orientation, they had different stations. And one of the stations was student loans. And my dad had given me tuition, money up front, and I, hashed and found lodging. That was kind of on me. But there was a tuition loan line for whatever. And I went there and they said, "No, we'll lend you money for tuition, no interest free, as long as you pay it back at the end of the year." And I thought, I'll take one of those. So that's kind of how it happened. And I had some extra money, and I started buying motorcycles. Now, let me go take a step back, because my love of motorcycles goes back to when I was 13 years old. And my parents just forbid, that was I never even mentioned motorcycle. I wasn't that stupid. But I had the best paper corner in LA. I was making probably $2 or $3 a day back, in the early 50s, when friends of mine were getting 50 cents a week for allowance, and we all got by. So I was making like real money really early. And I had a little kind of a soapbox derby racer. My parents gave me a lawnmower engine because I just wanted something to learn about engines, so they did go with that. Then I put it on a bicycle, and then I got a whizzer going, and then I bought a 1953 BSA. And I could hide these things in friends' garages. So I was riding motorcycles, from age 13 on. So when I got to college, that was my preferred mode of transportation. And at Berkeley, you could go to downtown Oakland, and you could buy motorcycles really cheap. And so I knew what the fraternity guys liked, I knew the spec, and I knew the color. They liked yellow. And so I was buying bikes and painting them in my apartment house on Durant. And I would probably sell a motorcycle a month. And by the way, I was maybe making $100 on a motorcycle because it was kind of sport. I was bartending in a place called the Rathskeller, which was the bar in Berkeley, and hashing and selling motorcycles, living the dream. And my fraternity brother was a fellow named Bill Harlan. And now he's a really famous winemaker. But back in the Berkeley days, we both raced motorcycles. And when I say we both raced motorcycles, on the weekends we'd go to Pittsburgh and Richmond, and we'd go different places and race motorcycles. Bill really raced motorcycles. I was just a backmarker because he was a great motorcycle rider. So, I love the whole motorcycle life, and that's what I lived pretty much my whole time at Berkeley. And it's carried over. When I came home, I still raced in the desert, and back then it was called TT Scrambles. It was a pretty casual affair, kind of like sports car racing was in the period. Not professional, not state-of-the-art, not sponsored, but just fun. So that was my motorcycle time.
That's fantastic. And I associate you so much with Southern California, and I know you went to school up in the Bay Area, but did you come from out of state to go to Berkeley, then stuck around, or were you a SoCal guy from birth?
From birth.
Yep.
I grew up in Hollywood. On Saturday nights, you could find me on Hollywood Boulevard or Sunset Boulevard or Tiny Nailers or any drive-in, just drooling on the cool cars, because I never would guess I'd have a cool car. And so I grew up and went to LA High School, right in the middle of LA. Today, it's badass, But in the days it might have been, but I didn't know any better, and I was right in the middle. It was a great school. And then Berkeley, for my finishing. And I live that expression, never let school get in the way of your education. Because I knew how to game it. I knew what courses to take. I knew how to study. My dad gave me a tip when I went to college. He says, never miss a class. And I think, I had friends and fraternity brothers that just, they read all the stuff, they did the homework, but they would occasionally come to class. I went to class, took copious notes. When the finals or the exams came, I knew they weren't going to go quiz us on anything that we hadn't talked about in school. So, I probably didn't read half my textbooks, just kind of got my notes down pretty good. So I had a great time at college, a great time.
That's fantastic. And then, I just think you kind of spent time down here in Southern California, both pre-college and post-college, of just incredible eras. I'm looking out on these cars. Some of these cars now in your collection are from that era. I presume that was a formative time for you to return to LA and start your career and start dabbling in cars. I presume you kind of graduated up from motorbikes and started doing a couple of other different things. Can you tell us kind of about the environment and the sort of car scene you came back to, right? Things were moving fast. There were new models every year.
Oh,
things were interesting, but you came back to Los Angeles, and what did you discover?
Randy, I was born to the day, the exact perfect time in history. I grew up with hot rods, dreamt about hot rods, and then my dad, who was my best friend, we were as different as night and day. He was best man at my wedding. We were super close. He said, if you save your money, I will help you buy your first car. So I saved my money, and This was back in like 1960, and I wanted to buy a Chevy Biscayne, which was the cheap model with the big engine and a 4-speed. And it worked for me in the fact that my dad did not understand cars, did not understand what a 348 or a 409 or anything was. And so I picked the cheap body style with a 4-speed, and I knew he would relate to the cheap body style. And so I was just ready to buy that car. It was $2,700. Excuse me, it's $2,400. And then I started seeing these Porsches running around. And I researched it, and I went to the Porsche dealership in Hollywood where I lived. John von Neumann was the dealer. And I found I could buy a Porsche, get it delivered in Europe for $2,700. $2,700. 24 was a Chevy. So I convinced my dad that I was going to get a compact car, that this was a way better move. And then I was going to go to Europe. I was going to get some culture.
Mm-hmm.
And move on. So my dad went for it.
You were a little bit of a salesman.
I was a hell of a salesman.
Yeah.
So my dad went for it. So in 1961, I picked up a Porsche in Germany, and that was the start of my Porsche world. I've been pretty much a Porsche guy since 1961. So what is that, 63 years or something like that.
You remember anything crazy from the European delivery story? I don't know if you see this on BAT, but we list 356s and such, and so many of them were delivered in Germany or picked up by a serviceman in Germany or different stuff like that. But you got to do one of those.
Absolutely. And back then you could save $300 or $400 by picking it up at the factory. That's how it kind of came back. It wasn't like I'd rather have instant car right off the showroom floor, but if you picked it up at the factory, it was a substantial savings. And back then there was no U.S. spec or German spec. I mean, there probably was, but I mean, I just picked up a Porsche. It was 1961. And, that was my car.
Wow.
And drove it a little bit in Europe and brought it home. And I've always, then in the 60s, in 1960, Porsches were really good until like 67. And in 68, they came out with smog rules and so forth, and they had to put a smog pump on it and weight down the front. Ralph Nader kind of got involved in the whole caper. And so I wanted to get a 911S, but they weren't not available in the U.S., so I discovered I could buy it from a dealer in Germany. So I started bringing in 911Ss in 67, 68, 69, 70. And so I'd buy probably 2 or 3 a year. I'd be driving the coolest car of anybody. I could sell it. My intent was to sell it for what I had in it. It cost me nothing. I would end up making, a few $100s and just having a cool car. A small world story, there are Porsche savants, guys that know every serial number, every license plate. And there's a fellow named Jeff Smith. He's from Washington, I think. And he came through my garage, and he saw a picture of me with one of my cars that's on the shelf over there. I'll show it to you. And he said, I know that car. And I said, how do you know that car? You don't know that car. And he said, no, I recognize the license plate. And it was a picture of me in 1970 with a big mustache, a tie that looked like a bib. I thought it was plenty cool. And my wife had taken a picture of me with this signal yellow 1970 911S. So, probably a month goes by, and he called me back and said, the guy that owns that car doesn't want to sell it, which was fine by me. I didn't want to buy it. I was just more curious, like, who had it, you know? And I said, who was it? He said, well, I have to ask him if it's okay. So he calls the guy that owns the car and said, look, the fellow that bought the car brand new was just curious, who owned the car. Would it be okay with you if I gave him your name? He said, oh, yeah, who is it? Bruce Meyer. He goes, oh, come on. This was a fellow named Alex Finnegan. I don't know if you know Alex Finnegan.
Yeah, sure, I know the name.
Alex Finnegan was the car guy behind Paul Russell back in Boston. Alex was like my brother, and we were so close. And he was so excited that I bought the car brand new. I was so excited that he had the car. And we kind of left it at that. We always talked about it. It was signal yellow 911S sports seats. I checked every extra. And sadly, Alex died 2 or 3 years ago.
Right.
So his family called and said, look, we're going to sell the car. Do you have any interest in buying it? So I mentioned it to my son, Evan, and Evan said, I'd love that car. So Evan bought it. So Evan has one of my original owner, 911S is signal yellow, which is a great color. It's a wonderful, warm yellow color. So I was just buying cars in Europe, and most of them I would buy from a dealer over there, and he would buy them in light ivory. So I had a lot of light ivory cars. He also liked full leather, which was an option, you know. So, I had some really interesting cars, some good cars.
Well, we sell a lot of those on BAT now, but I don't know how I'm ever going to match the colors and the license plates to the ones that you were the original owner on. But if we ever see one, I'll definitely flag that and send it back your guys' way. That's a tremendous sort of Porsche pipeline here into Southern California.
I'm going to show you the picture.
Okay.
Because it's right over here on my shelf.
Ooh, you get a load of the suit and the mustache you mentioned. That's pretty great.
So that
Man,
was,
one of the last black plates, ZZE
yeah, and it still has the plate on it.
That's unbelievable.
Isn't
That's
that amazing?
That's maybe the latest black plate I've ever seen. ZZE
Yeah.
on it. It's got the 2.2 sticker in the back, and yeah, it's that yellow color, and it's an S. You like the S cars, right? You got the good ones.
Always.
Yeah, that's your MO. Always the good ones.
So, anyways, it's just a great store. I love that.
That's fantastic. It's fun. I was actually going to ask you when you started saying that the 356 you bought in Europe delivery, and then all this sort of pipeline of 911s. Well, that's fantastic, hearing about the Porsche stories. So that got you sort of into the 70s. But I look out now, and your taste, I think, is eclectic and interesting and kind of similar to a lot of people on BAT, like a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and a couple motorcycles here in your display, a lot of sports cars, but some big cars, some big sedans. What would you say are sort of some of the influences that have made you, obviously you had the Porsche story, but you've spread out pretty broadly from there in terms of checking a lot of boxes? Is it based on different experiences they can provide, or is it the design that kind of gets you excited about the colors and the histories and the designers, or is it, what is it that makes for this eclectic mix?
Sure. It looks like, the only common thread of any of these cars is me. And I've always been, my business is in the retail business, so, it's got to be good looking or it doesn't sell. So for me, the aesthetic is really, really important. It could be the most famous hot rod or the most famous Bentley or the most famous anything. And if it doesn't appeal to my aesthetic, I just don't have any interest. And on Bring a Trailer, you had an awesome, famous car called the Go-Kart. It was a road racer, Model T, built by Duffy Livingstone, who was really the father of Go-Kart. And I just worked so hard to bring myself around to buying that because it checked every historical box. And he's probably a bad word now, but I'm a patriot. I love the flag. I have a flag on every car, in front of my house at home and everywhere. I'm very proud of my heritage. And this car was very important to American road racing because it raced against Maseratis and Ferraris and all the so-called fancy, foreign cars and won. So that car, I think, Ross Myers might have that back in Pittsburgh or Philadelphia, but whoever has this got a very cool car, and that was on Bring a Trailer. And I love Bring a Trailer. I mean, it's ridiculous. I mean, I get my fix every morning. I look at it. I've told my family I'm not buying another car. So, I used to, but before Bring a Trailer, it was Hemmings Motor News. And I would get Hemmings first class. And before that, it was the LA Times. And I would get the Sunday paper on Saturday. And I would go through there just searching for stuff. And I used to get the Hemmings Motor News, and I would just when that came, don't bother Bruce, because I'm going through every ad. And now I stopped subscribing to Hemmings. By the way, Hemmings is great. But the last couple of years I had Hemmings, it would arrive, and I deliberately wouldn't pick it up for a week because I figured the good shit would be gone. And that's just what I like, because I do not want another car. But I guess everything in here either has to be the first or the fastest or, the prettiest or whatever. That kind of is what drives me. And it's the story. Every car out here has a story, even a boat. It's all in the story. Somebody could walk by that Yellowbird and never even comment on it. Just looks like another yellow Porsche, but the story of Alois Roof and the Yellowbird, one of 29, that's the first one. That's CTR 001. I've ended up with a few firsts, but not because I went out hunting for firsts. I just happened that way. The Gurney Eagle, the Formula One car is the first one. The Cobra was the first one. And the CTR, the Yellowbird is the first one. So it's all about the story. And I love Le Mans. Le Mans is the World Cup, Super Bowl, Olympic Games of motorsport. It used to be the Mille Miglia, Targa Florio, and Le Mans. Those were the three races that mattered. And sadly, the Mille Miglia, went away, and so did Targa Florio, both with tragic accidents. Le Mans also had a tragic accident, but has remained, and that is the most important motorsport race in the world. I mean, Indy's pretty cool. I like Indy a lot, and it's in great hands with Penske. The 24 Hours of Daytona is probably the equivalent to the American Le Mans, but there's just nothing like Le Mans. So we have a bunch of cars that raced at Le Mans, did well at Le Mans. That means a lot to me.
When we first walked in the room, you said these 5 or 6 were, players at Le Mans, and you could tell you kind of your eyes lit up that that's super meaningful for you, which is neat to see. Mm-hmm. I love the pictures you have behind the cars of them on track and period and that sort of thing. I think picking 1 or 2 out to chat about that are in the collection would be super interesting to me. Some are pretty well associated with you. People may have seen pictures of you with the Yellowbird or with the silver Ferrari that was in the Petersen for a while. But the first Cobra, you call it the first Cobra, right?
That is the first Cobra.
I love that sentence. That is the first Cobra. I mean, that's kind of unbelievable for me, but and unbelievable in a great way. Like, I mean, its presence right now with you. If you could tell us, obviously, I mean, if it's the first one off the line, that's fantastic, but how it came to you, maybe an interesting story for folks, or something about the way you own that and are the custodian of that car now. How does that all work?
I can tell it all.
I love it. Oh, man, I love it.
Yeah,
I'm here for it.
So in 1965, I bought a Cobra. I've always had a Cobra.
Is that right? Okay,
Yeah.
I did not know
I say
that.
not always, but since the 60s.
Since they came out, you always have one.
Yeah, I like them a lot.
What's about his L.A. car?
It's
guy as it gets
L.A.,
for me.
American, and Shelby, and I would say, a good friend of Carroll Shelby's. So I would say my garage has switched from boulevard cars to race cars over the years. It's kind of trended that way. I had some fabulous street Cobras, but I just always wanted to find a Cobra race car that had significance. And with Cobras, and probably with a lot of, and Porsches, they had a rough life. And in the world of Cobras, there's probably a handful that I would even consider because, sometimes they put a new chassis on it or they put a new body on it or, it's just been, it's compromised to the point where I wouldn't feel comfortable saying that car is the one. Even though it may have the CSX number, it's just been it's too far gone and brought back. It's like washing the Zax.
Yep.
The handle's been changed once and the head only twice, but it's still washing his axe. So anyways, with Cobras, if you have a Cobra, the first thing they ask you is what is your CSX number?
Sure.
Charlie Sierra X-Ray, CSX. So if it starts with a 2 or a 3, it's a real car, in my eyes. And if it's a 3 or 4 or 7 or whatever, they're still made by Shelby. And they're considered Cobras. But I just have to have like the real. And so the very first Cobra was the prototype, and that was CSX 2000. And that was a car that was built in Dean Moon's shop, all hot rodders. By the way, my favorite car is the Scarab. The Scarab, Cobra, Decon Monza, some of the great cars were total hot rod efforts. They were hot rodders building it, hot rodders engineering it. The man behind the win of at Le Mans for Shelby was Phil Remington. These guys, Don Spencer, these guys were hot rod savants. And so Shelby, I was a great admirer of Shelby, not of the way he did business. I'll just leave it at that because this is for public consumption. But he had a way, and he was a great salesman. He worked on everybody else's money. But he built the first Cobra in Dean Moon's shop. It was painted a lot of different colors, given to different magazines, because nobody wanted to show the same blue car over and over and over.
And then it was yellow for a period of time, right? And it was a bunch of different things?
A bunch of different things. And that was CSX 2000. And that stayed in the Shelby family for his whole life. So one of the fellows that worked with Shelby was a fellow named Ed Hughes. And Ed Hughes is a really famous name in motorsport. I could spend all the rest of the podcast talking about Ed Hughes, but he really bankrolled and helped Shelby out when Shelby needed help. And he took delivery of CSX 2001, which is the car we have here, which is the very first car. So there's a book on it called The First Three Cobras. It's 2000, 2001, and 2002. 2000 is the prototype. 2000 is the one that we have here. 2002 was their first works race car that Billy Krause drove and Ken Miles, and it was a really great car, raced in America. 2001, the car that's here, the black one, was sold to a fellow named Lucky Kasner. And it was Lloyd Lucky Kasner, and he had a race team called Camerati. They did a lot of Maseratis. They actually did Corvettes in 1960, but...
Birdcage. They drove the white birdcage with the blue on it. Is that right?
Exactly right. Camerati. And he was a good friend of Shelby's, and Shelby drove with him. I think out of friendship for Shelby, he probably bought the car and took it to Le Mans in 1964. And he ran the trials and did rather well. But in 64, Shelby came through with his FIA cars, which were like the next gen. You know, Weber's, notch back door, big rear wings. You know, you weren't going to do well running this car as it came out against the FIA car. So Kasner sold it to a fellow named Jean-Marie Vincent, a wealthy Frenchman who took the car to Ford Racing and said, convert this to an FIA car. Because the FIA cars, can't say this is a fact, but my guess is money wouldn't buy some of the works cars back in the period. So if you wanted to buy an FIA car and you were some wealthy Frenchman, that wasn't going to get you through. So he bought this car, took it to Ford Racing, and had it converted to FIA specs. That car here is full FIA specs. It has rack and pinion steering, which was converted in 63 and 64. It has, GT40 wheels on it, a big back end like a 427, like an FIA car. I mean, it's just aesthetically just checks every box for me. So how did I come about it? There's that expression of blind squirrel will find a nut. Mm-hmm. That's me with that car. By the way, every car in here I've overpaid for because it's all kind of targeted purchases. Mm-hmm. But that car just fell into my lap in France 20-some years ago. I was at an event called Retromobile. And back then I was in the buying mode. So I went to setup day, because setup day is, you get the preview look. So I saw this Cobra. Now I know my Cobras pretty well. And I saw this Cobra and the way it's, the profile, the way it's fit, it just didn't make sense to me, but it was on a very credible stand. This Lucas Hooney, who's a very famous...
Sure. The biggest stand at Retromobile, right?
Biggest stand at Retromobile. Yep. And by the way, it was then too.
Yep.
So here is this Aston Martin green Cobra, good looking thing with the big rear wheels. And I think, I got to ask about it. I mean, I wasn't interested in buying it because I knew it. I just figured it was just a made up thing. So Lucas, and I bought a Bugatti from Lucas, and he says, come with me. And he's a big Swiss guy. And he says, come with me. And I went with him and he said, sit here. And he comes back with like a milk crate full of documents. And he said, this is the first Cobra ever built. And I'm going, really? I don't think so. But he brought all the paperwork out. It's only had like 4 owners. I mean, it has had a clear title. And one of the things, when you're buying a race car, provenance matters, and continuous history, continuous ownership. Like if it goes away for 4 years, people don't know where it went, I'd be very careful. So he had every owner, and it turned out that time that I bought it, every owner all the past owners came to Retromobile that year. I thought, damn. So I bought it.
But it was green at the time.
It was green.
It's now black with a big number 1.
Yeah.
For those listening who
I kept it in Europe. I did a rally in Europe from Budapest to Prague. Then I sent it over here to a fellow named Mike McCluskey, who's kind of the guru of Cobra restorations. And we stripped it down, absolutely positively, the original body, original interior, original chassis. You could see where they grafted the, rack and pinion on. I mean, it was so pure and so perfect and so authentic. It just warmed my heart. So anyways, I painted it black, put a number 1 on it. It actually ran with number 1, but I put number 1 for the significance of the car. And that was 20 years ago. And we've had on the Colorado Grand, we take it to a lot of Cobra events. It's going to be featured next month in the Shelby American magazine. They just came and took pictures. Evan Klein, a photographer. We were up on Mulholland whipping around in that thing. Did I answer your question?
You did. You keep answering other questions that I haven't even asked. It's so good. It makes me so happy. Well, anyway, that's a fantastic short history of that car. But
And let me just answer another question.
oh, please.
What's my favorite car?
I love this.
That one.
That one's your favorite.
You know, there's something about that car that just, you feel good just sitting in it and starting it. And it's quick enough that, you know, you can hurt yourself in it. And it's slow enough that you're not going, you know, 3-digit speed in a city block. And it checks every box for me. And it's my generation, and it is the first one. And there's only one number 1. And I could sell some of the cars in here and maybe buy them back at a later date or buy something equivalent. But there's only one number 1 Cobra, and that just resonates with me.
I love it. Well, I hope we'll post some photos of the black Cobra. It's a very special car. Does it have a 260 or a 289 in it?
So it was born with a 260, and Ed Hugas put a 289 before it went to Europe.
Okay. Fantastic. Anyway, beautiful car.
Thank you.
But what intrigued me about that story is you said you've had a Cobra continuously since 65. That one, it sounds like, didn't come till around 2000. So was there one that you kept for a super long time and then you got that one and unloaded it? Or were there a succession of, did you have the whole 289, then you had a 427, then you kind of rotated them through?
So
what were those?
When I graduated school, I went back to Michigan, worked in Michigan, decided I want to get an American car when I come back. You know, I drove my Porsche back to Michigan. And so it was a Corvette or a Cobra, you know. And in '65, I bought a Cobra, but I couldn't get it insured. The insurance companies were just reluctant to insure a 23-year-old or 20.
Real quick on that, where do you buy a Cobra in 1965? Did you buy it from Shelby?
Right
Or you bought a
here.
used one?
Oh, no. I mean, I can continue to answer questions.
I love this. No. I mean, it's so, what's so fascinating about you to me, Bruce, is just that you were kind of there. You know what I mean? And so for me, just the total fantasy world that I was born in 77, I was too late for all this. So just to thinking about sitting across some desk from somebody, paying cash for a Cobra in 65 is like total mountaintop for me. So just hearing your words
that's great.
about, where'd you get the car in 65?
So I'm old, you know, so let me just take a step back before the Cobra.
Okay,
So I graduated Berkeley and took a bartending job up at Lake Tahoe.
great. At what joint in Lake Tahoe? Do you
It
remember?
was called It was called the Forest Inn. And if you're old, you remember the Forest Inn. It was fine dining.
This is Tahoe City or this is South Lake?
Tahoe City.
This is Tahoe City. I love it.
And so I was a bartender and, you know, did food service when I was at college. So they hired me to work at this restaurant. It was owned by a family by the name of Faust. They worked Tahoe in the summer and Cathedral City in the desert in the winter. So they would close it and back for it. So I went to work for them right out of college. And up at Lake Tahoe, there's a boat company called Sierra Tahoe Boat Company.
I love it. I love that place.
Oh, I love wooden boats, as you can tell. So, and when you're a bartender, you go to work at 4 in the afternoon. So you got all day. And so I would go to Sierra Tahoe Boat Company all the time. And in the back, I haven't been there in a few years, but in the back was a big indoor storage area with ways. And I was looking at the Hackers and, you know, Garwoods and Chris's and it was so great. And I went to the back of the boat place, and here was stuffed in the back was a Gullwing. Wow. And a Gullwing, even to this day, is maybe one of the prettiest cars ever designed anywhere. And I looked inside the Gullwing, because that was like a dream machine for me. And it had a reverse lockout, like a Chevy engine. And like, oh my God. So I went charging back to Dick Clark, who ran the boat company. I said, tell me about that Gullwing. Oh no, we put a Chevy engine in it over the winter. Now to me, that was perfection. So to make a long story short, I bought the car, $4,000, sold my Porsche, took all my tips and it was my net worth in 1964, and I bought that Gullwing. I drove it home. It was my everyday driver. It was faster than a Cobra.
What was the engine? A little 283 or what did it
I
have?
know, 327.
327.
I'm telling you, it was ridiculously fast. And I have friends that like fast cars and motorcycles. All of them begged me to slow down. I took it out to the drags and went 113. That's faster than a Cobra. Anyways, blah, blah, blah. I took the car up for a football game in Berkeley in '65, sold it to Bill Harlan.
Is that right?
He still has it.
He has it still?
With the Chevy in it.
Oh my goodness. What color is the car?
It was blue when I bought it, and now it's black.
Okay.
And Will has two children, Amanda. Bill has two, Will and Amanda. Mm-hmm. I think this is Will's favorite car.
For sure.
Because it was interesting. Evan commented to me, you know, Dad, if you could ever get that Gullwing back. And I just had a little chat with Bill. I said, you know, do you love that Gullwing? Oh, yeah, it's Will's favorite car. I'm telling you, Randy, if you drove this car, it would blow you away. Factory Rudge wheels, 327 Chevy, probably, I'm guessing, 350, 400 horsepower. Light, it's everything.
And you got it down here to LA. You drove it around the mountains. You brought it down here.
I drove it. I bought it at the end of summer because I had to work up the money. I drove it down here, drove it for the year, then took it up to Berkeley for a football game, not with any intention of selling it. Sold it to Bill. And then in '65, came back down here, bought a Cobra, but couldn't get it insured because whatever algorithm they use, this is not the guy you want driving a Cobra. So I sold it to my roommate because he worked for a big company and he could insure it as a Mustang. Then my other roommate went out in 1966 and bought brand new a Cobra, 427, from Robert Loud Ford in Pasadena. So now we had, I went back to, I bought a Chevy Corvette, but they didn't like that as well as the Porsche. Then bought a Porsche in 66, and that's what started the whole, you know, bringing cars in. But so there were four of us. One guy was totally not a car guy, but the three car guys, we would just, whatever car was in front, we'd take. So I drove the Cobra, big block, small block. They drove my Porsche, and that was just like a motor pool. You just take whatever that you felt like driving that day. So I had that, and then I bought a big block, and then I bought a big block and converted it to an SC. Then I bought an SC that we could talk a lot about air cars, because you have to be careful of where you are. And by the way, here's another question you didn't ask. Your copywriting in Bring a Trailer changed the world of copywriting. I was reading some description of a car in RM, and it sounded like right out of Bring a Trailer. You know, powered by, you know, with a cabin of, I mean, it was like, you made it like fair to everybody. You know, we're not going to say this was owned or this did this or that. It's just facts. I love it. I love the way you've handled that. And so I don't know where I'm going with this, but
Cobras, through the years of Cobras. But it sounds like, were you buying and selling some of these in the era where they
No,
kind of got
I didn't buy and sell Cobras like I was buying and selling Porsches. Right. I was buying and selling Porsches so I would have a cool ride every day.
Okay, I got you.
But
in the 70s, nobody wanted Cobras, right? I mean, didn't those people couldn't give them away?
Couldn't give them away.
Amazing.
That's right. And then in the middle 70s, I bought a Cobra. Then I bought the big black Cobra. Anyways, I've had a lot of Cobras. And one of them was an air car.
I don't know if I know what you're talking about with air car. Tell me
Okay,
what you're
so
talking
this
about.
is something you could write a book on. You need to scrutinize the guys that write the registries. Because if you're dishonest and you're writing the registry, which shows a registry meaning every serial number, the history of the car,
right.
blah, 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 blah.
This is like the Shelby American Club book that they put out with the history of all the cars.
100%, and it's written by Ned Scudder, who's as honorable as the day is long.
Great.
But there were some people involved in the very beginning that noticed that some of the Cobras were like MIA, and they found them in quotes.
Oh, air. So you're saying like out of thin air.
Out of thin air.
Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, because you could build a Cobra.
Sure.
You could buy a Brian Anglis chassis.
Sure.
Get a body from here and put it there, and all of a sudden you've got a Cobra.
Yep.
And by the way, it's probably as authentic as a lot of Cobras out there are now. But so I bought a car thinking I bought the world's best SC, and it turned to be not so great. So then I bought a great one. I just, there's some fake cars you got to be careful of out there.
That's a fascinating one. I love hearing about those cars. Switching topics a little bit, just chatting about some of the stuff you're involved in today. I know you're passionate about a lot of parts of the hobby. I see you up at Pebble Beach and showing cars, obviously these tours and events you do, but the Petersen is near and dear to your heart, the Petersen Museum. I wanted to make sure we chat about that. We did a BAT event at the Petersen. We've done some charity events. We sell cars that the Petersen is liquidating to raise funds and different things, which is really exciting. But you're sort of one of the statesmen there of the Checkered Flag 200, which is their sort of club and highly involved group there. But tell us why that's so important to you and what that means to you.
Well, so I'm the founding chairman of the Petersen. And there's a group that I really wanted you to join called YPO, because you would be in the Hall of Fame of YPO, which is Young Presidents Organization. But now, Randy, sadly, he aged out.
Am I young anymore? Yeah, I don't know if I'm young anymore.
But I was a member of YPO. I joined it in 1977. And one of our members was Robert E. Petersen, Bob Petersen. And Petersen was like one of my heroes, an awesome guy. He created Hot Rod Magazine, published it. And I knew him over the years casually, really got to know him when the Petersen came about. But he was really not a car guy as such, but he was kind of like Shelby knew how to put together a team. He knew, like he would bring Randy Neunenberg in to run his online business. He knew how to pick winners. And he was what I call an opportunistic buyer. He could smell a deal. He bought real estate here in town. He bought somebody's collection of gold nuggets. He had probably the finest collection of shotguns in the world. He and Bob Lee in Reno, Nevada. Petersen just had such a variety of interests, and he was such a good buyer. So he bought that whole city block. And he came to me and he said, let's do a car museum, basically. I'm dwarfing like what could be a whole podcast. So somebody mentions cars to me, I get all excited. So I said, absolute great idea. And I didn't even know I didn't have visualized what a car museum was, but we hooked up with the Natural History Museum in Los Angeles, because with that we could give our museum a capital M, because they were a very highly respected natural history museum. And that's like dinosaur bones and wild animals and stuff. And so they were our partner for the first number of years. It was a partnership made in hell. They disliked us. Our executive director had a short fuse, so would tell them to f off, whenever he felt like it. It was horrible. And finally, we put this museum together. All the displays were dioramas. The problem with the diorama is that you don't just change it out every month. We kept it in there for 10 years. So you saw a car stuck in the mud on Mulholland Drive when you went there, 1992. And when you went back and, whenever 10 years later, that car was still stuck in the mud, the same car. So we found that, and I was a chairman for 10 years and trying to make it go and keeping everybody together and all the balls in the air. But when we first got together with the Natural History Museum, there were no car guys involved at all, none. So when we were putting the museum together, it was not like constructed as a museum, it was constructed as a department store.
That's right, it's a converted department store, right?
And so we gutted it, and all it was a shell of a building.
Yeah.
And I started bringing in car guys, Dan Gurney, Parnelli Jones, Alex Exidius, Wally Parks, and then some of my car homies, And the Natural History Museum couldn't understand why anybody would be doing such a thing. So that should have been the first clue. But I started this group called the Checkered Flag 200 because I wanted to get 200 people that would give. With a museum, it's always a challenge raising money. And so I wanted to put together a group of people that would just donate for the love of donating. And if we got 200 guys to give $1,000 a year, we'd raise $200,000 for whatever event or whatever the executive director felt was worthy. And people would come to me, Bruce, don't call it the 200, call it the 100, you'll never get 200. so anyways, I got 200, but I got my banker and I got an accountant and a guy had painted a building for me. And so anyways, I got to 200, and that included Phil Hill and Shelby and some of these guys that, oh, I mean, we got to give 1,000 next year too. Well, some of those guys opted out, but we had people to replace them. Now we have over 800 people, and now it's not $1,000 a year, it's $1,800 a year, and it's 50,000 if you want to be a lifetime member. We have 125 lifetime members. I mean, the museum is just so smoking hot, runs so well, and that was, the start of the checkered flag. We do an event every month, and I'm still the head of it. It's because what I love. I love putting events together and calling friends and say, we're going to come by. I mean, I'm Jay Leno. We've gone to his garage. We've gone to places that the average enthusiast couldn't go. They couldn't call Rob Walton or General Motors or Jim Farley at Ford and say, we want to come by, with our checkered flag. We went back to the Henry Ford Museum with Bill Ford and Chip Ganassi right after the running of Le Mans. So we do stuff. The members of the checkered flag get their money's worth plus. We have almost no turnover. I would say 10%, maybe 20% live out of state. Last month, we were in Dallas. We went to see Charlie Nierberg's collection, Aaron Shelby, the Ross Perot Museum. And I always like to throw in a big home. Went to Tom Thomas's home, like is one of these ridiculous homes in Dallas, So it's fun. We try and appeal to everything. I would say of the group, we have between 50 and 100, depending on where we're going. I would say 2/3 are guys and 1/3 are couples, So we try and do something cultural, something with a home. But the group is working, and what's really working is the Petersen Automotive Museum. And I credit that with Terry Cargis, who's our executive director, and Michael Bodell, who works with him, and Anna Song. Honest to God, any museum on earth would be so lucky to have a team like that. They're fiscally responsible, a delight to work with, so deeply talented. Our staff there, I don't know when the last time you were at the museum, but when you walk in there, you just feel like you've come home. The greeter at the door, the security, everybody welcomes you. Terry is just one of those 1 in a million guys that knows how to build a team of big-hearted, enthusiasts, wonderful people. So I really credit Terry with turning that museum around.
Well, fantastic. Thanks for sharing about it. I can see your passion sort of in your eyes when you talk about it, and the team and the checkered flag group. I hope I haven't aged out of that group too. I don't know. I think I probably may be able to slide in there if I can give it a shot. Huh?
Are you a member?
That could be fun. I am not as a I've been to the
you
museum
will
a number of times.
This is not going to air till you're a member.
Sounds like I'm going to be a recruit. So that sounds fantastic. I would gladly be a part.
You don't do what people tell you to. Like the YPO thing you didn't do, and now the checkered flag. So I gotta make a real good eye contact here and make sure you're.
Absolutely. But anyway, thank you for telling us about that. I'm hopeful that the Petersen has a good long run in front of it of success and bringing new people into enthusiasm about cars. They have so many cool themed events. So anyway, I encourage every car buddy of mine that's in LA, like that's a stop on the tour.
Have you been there? When was the last time you all were there?
It's been a year or more for me.
Have you seen our lowrider exhibit? It is amazing. It's the best lowrider exhibit ever created in the world. We have our creative director, Brian Stevens. This guy could make a bar of soap look amazing. I mean, he is so creative and so talented. And so he put together this lowrider exhibit, which, first of all, the whole lowrider community. I haven't seen a whole lot of lowriders on Bring a Trailer.
We've had a couple interesting ones. It's not the main, but we've had some, they kind of sneak through.
Probably because most lowriders like to work on them themselves and create their own.
And don't want to sell them, right? It's like
and don't want to sell them.
Yeah.
It's an heirloom. You're 100% right. It's a family effort. When we did our opening, we borrowed every car in there. And with every car came a wife and kids, and they all know how to work on their cars. And it's just an awesome genre of cars. There's nothing like a
It's a very LA thing, right? It's ground zero right around here. It's
maybe, I think so.
That you have exhibitions. So anyhow, I'm excited to hear you talk about the Petersen. That's something I associate very closely with you and the checkered flag group. I know it all has sort of your imprint on a lot of that. So other than that, we've touched on the Petersen, we've touched on some of your early cars. I mean, man, we could go around all the cars I see behind you.
Yeah.
Yeah, we would certainly love to have you back on the podcast another time, maybe to talk about some more things or go do one of these events together. But overall, yeah, just want to say thanks for your support of BAT. I know you share it with your friends. You've convinced folks to bid. You've just been one of the folks in the early days that I think we've had some folks in the car community that kind of put their stamp of approval on BAT and said, these are good guys, go use this website. And I put you at the top of the list of folks who have done that, and it's been part of our success, and we appreciate it.
Well, I don't do anything that I don't want to do. And when you get to be my age, you can kind of do that. And I mean, I bought my Bugatti when you were in the early BAT, when you were just mentioning things. It was an auction in Austria. And you just mentioned there's this auction in Austria, and I remember because it was a holiday time, and I was supposed to escort the mayor in my car. Anyways, it just drew me down that rabbit hole, and I went and I called. It was a Koi's auction in Austria, and the next car up was this Bugatti that anyways. So, I mean, I bought on Bring a Trailer, I've sold on Bring a Trailer, all very successfully, all honorably. It's just the most real, honest, wonderful development, and everybody's trying to figure out how to get a little piece of what you do. But, and I get all the links. The only one I open every morning is Bring a Trailer.
Wow. That's high praise, Bruce. We appreciate it. Last thing I want to mention is you've got a cool item that you're bringing to BAT, which is sitting over my left shoulder,
right?
Which is this cool memorabilia item.
You can
just give us a quick pitch on that.
If you can lift it, you can have it. It comes in its own carrying case. It's a big wall clock, like a Hublot Ferrari watch. It was given to me by Piero Ferrari for a favor I did for him. I just look at it. I don't know where to put it. And I see, things appearing on Bring a Trailer like neons and, owner's manuals and things that I think are very interesting. So I think, and we'll find out, that hopefully somebody will see the beauty in it, because I think it's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, it looks super, super cool in its carrying case here. And it's about 2 feet across and an operable, big, beautiful wall clock.
Yeah.
Anyway, anytime we can list something on BAT that comes from the Bruce Meyer building here, I think that's a pretty green light on our end, Bruce. And so anyway, just want to say what a privilege it is to sit here with you, and we appreciate your hospitality and your support of BAT. So thanks for being part of the podcast, and I hope everybody listening just has a smile on their face as they hear about your stories and your enthusiasm.
Well, thank you, and same to you, Randy.
Thanks everybody for listening, and stay tuned for the next BAT podcast.